State. Tonight, they went off to war like heroes.
We got the weight of a flag on our shoulders. We're untouchable.
But once you get over there, it's nothing like that.
Now, more and more Canadians are returning from Afghanistan with a wound no one can see, a wound that for so long no one wanted to acknowledge.
Nobody wants to be broken in the Army. Nobody. Nobody wants to be weak.
I'm no longer Dave. You're now Dave with PTSD.
PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. For veterans and their families, a new kind of battle, potentially just as deadly, begins once they're home. And did you feel threatened?
I thought he could hurt me.
Canada's top soldier says more is being done to help.
Where we are today is not where we were 5 or 10 years ago.
West, south, and north. Roger.
But another soldier, still living with his own demons, worries it's not good enough.
This injury, PTSD, leads to suicide in extreme. I tried it 4 times.
Hello and welcome. I'm Gillian Findley. It is the invisible wound of war. Our parents and grandparents knew it as shell shock. Today, we use acronyms like OSI and PTSD. Whatever it's called, though, the reality is that hundreds, maybe thousands of Canadian military personnel are coming home from Afghanistan in one piece physically, but in pieces psychologically, overloaded by the sights and sounds of what they've seen and done. Over the years, our generals have been slow to recognize this injury. Now new leadership is putting treatment programs into place. But one of Canada's most respected soldiers warns from his own searing experience that those who come home wounded in ways we cannot see could be facing a long-term battle, one that has a body count all its own. Tonight, Canadian veterans of Afghanistan share their candid and troubling stories, and General and Senator Romeo Dallaire on why it's so important that we listen.
A bunch of my family's been in the military. Grandfather, uncle, great uncle, you know.
22-year-old Dave Hawkins lives in St. Thomas, Ontario. To hear his parents tell it, he was destined to serve.
But ever since he was 8 years old, he dressed up as a military guy, if you will, and went out for Halloween. So we always kind of thought this was something he would do.
He joined the reserves in high school, thinking if not the military, then maybe a career in policing or firefighting. Either way, a stint in Afghanistan would be valuable experience.
You know, sign up for a tour, go overseas, actually do something. You see the movies and stuff like that, and you always wish it was like that. But once you get over there, it's nothing like that.
Dave landed in Kandahar last fall, attached to what the military calls a quick reaction force. They're the guys who go at the first sign of trouble and see the most troubling things.
If anything happened outside the wire, like someone found an IED or someone blew up from an IED, you'd have to go to that situation. You want to get there as quick as possible, but at the same time, you want to make sure you can get there alive.
For a kid who'd only ever seen war on a video screen, it was stressful, riding around in the back of a convoy knowing that at any moment something could explode.
You don't know who your enemy is, really. When you're driving down the road, it's out of your control whether you blow up or not. You kind of got to sit in the back of the vehicle and cross your fingers.
When something did happen, Dave says it was the additional stress of waiting for commanders sometimes kilometers away to give permission to fight.
They just killed 2 guys right in front of us. Let's do something about this. We can see them. We know where they are. Let us go get them. I think that's one of the hardest things you can possibly do is just watch and not do anything about it.
Hello?
Back at home, Dan Hawkins tweaked early on that his son was struggling. Dave didn't say much in his weekly phone calls home. He didn't have to.
I don't know. It's just an odd thing between Dave and I. We have this really weird bond. It's It's almost like even though he was all those thousands of miles away, I could feel what he was feeling. It's weird.
Well, when did you first realize that
December.
things were not going well, yeah?
December.
What happened?
Well, we phoned him, and he was so down. He didn't even want to go for dinner with the rest of his troops. He just wanted to sit in his room. I knew then that I wasn't getting the same guy back.
What Dave remembers is exhaustion.
I wasn't sleeping. I was eating crappy. I'd stay up till like 2, 3 in the morning. I'd go to bed for maybe about an hour and a half at best. And then I'd be back up and I'd have to do the same thing the next day.
But then came the day just after Christmas. Dave's best friend in Afghanistan, a soldier with whom he'd shared basic training, went out in one of those convoys with Dave. The friend didn't make it back.
He's probably about 3, 4 vehicles in front of us, but I'd say about 10 vehicles in front of him went over the same spot and nothing happened, and then all of a sudden, you know, stuff happens. All the guys came out of the vehicle, out of the back, and they were all covered with smoky dust and everything else, and I was looking at the faces through the binoculars, seeing if I could pinpoint which guy was. I thought they all got out at first, and then I realized there was one man short, and I knew who it was, and right then I was, you know, kind of sank.
Back in St. Thomas, Dan sank too, and did the only thing he could think of. He got on the phone and he didn't stop dialing until he'd finally connected with someone in Afghanistan who could help.
I found out the name of a padre who was in the same area as David, and I got a hold of him, and I said, I want you to find my son. I talked to him.
That was a big step for me. That took me to go to actually talk to someone. The hardest step I could possibly have done.
Why was it so hard?
Because you feel like you shouldn't have to. You feel like you should be stronger than that. You know? Like you're a soldier, you know? You're going to see stuff like this. You're going to do stuff like this. Right? Soldier on type deal.
It's the pressure that's always been on soldiers. Every war has had its PTSD casualties, although it wasn't always called that. Nostalgia, soldier's heart, shell shock. It was never an honorable diagnosis, and through the years, few soldiers got anything resembling treatment. It wasn't until Vietnam that the idea that minds could be just as vulnerable as bodies in war was widely recognized. But those veterans returned home to a country at war with itself over their contribution. The depression, the homelessness, the suicides that followed were often explained by that. So in 2002, when Jeff Gravel came home from Afghanistan, PTSD wasn't even on his radar. He'd been among the first Canadians deployed, working in the mountains, shoulder to shoulder with the Americans, chasing Al-Qaeda. For a soldier whose only previous experience had been peacekeeping in Bosnia, it didn't get better than that.
Time of my life.
Yeah, and what did you think you were going to do?
We just suited up for the big game. But all of a sudden, we've got the All-Star jerseys on. We've got 30 pounds of coolness on our chest. We've got a Kevlar helmet with night vision attachments. At the time, it was the best place in the world to be.
And when they came home, they were heroes, treated to their own parade down the streets of Edmonton. Jeff's unit was singled out for special commendation, and it all cemented his decision to make the military his career.
You're living almost like a rock star high. You're totally removed from everything that you hated because all you wanted to do was come home. And then when you got home, everything was great because you were the hero, you made it home, everyone's proud that you're home, everyone's happy you're home. And then the very next thought is, oh, Johnny's not here. You know, Johnny would like to have seen this. You know,
and who was your...
Billy would like to have been home. Ainsworth, Dyer, Jordan, Anderson, there's several, Aaron Doyle. We buried him last year.
Yeah. These are the guys you think of?
Oh, yeah, constantly.
Yeah.
A bad day, I'll stay in the basement. I'll stay closed up with the blinds drawn. I won't leave the house. Maybe I'll drink a bottle.
It was the beginning of a downward spiral, accelerated by the pain of having survived. People talk about survivor's guilt.
Yep.
Is that something that plagues you?
I've heard tell of it. I've heard tell of it from my doctors. I think maybe.
What's the guilt that you live with?
Why them, not me? They had a lot to live for, too. I made a lot of mistakes in my life that maybe had they been given the chance, maybe they would have just led a good, clean life and been something to honor. Maybe I made a tarnish of that memory. There's a lot of pressure to do good by them, to do good in their memory, to make sure their memory doesn't die, and to not make an ass of yourself while you're doing it.
Like generations of soldiers before them, Jeff and his war buddies found their release in the bottle and in drugs.
Cocaine became easy to get. I mean, if you wanted a joint, it would take 2 hours. If you wanted cocaine, it would be there in 10 minutes. The whole social circle fell into it. We were all part of it. It was a coping mechanism.
What was it you were trying to sort of bury at that point? I mean, what were the emotions that you didn't want to...
The hurt, the guilt. With us, such strong kids, such fit, healthy, and to lose them at such a young age, adds a different trauma to the whole incident. It really attacks your sense of invincibility, because we're supposed to be invincible, right?
It was that pressure to be invincible that stood between Jeff and treatment for years. He knew he was falling apart. The soldier in him wouldn't ask for help. Why didn't you? Why did you not want to?
Because I'm a grown man. I knew what I was doing. I got my airborne wings. I'm Army. I'm a sergeant. What do you know? What do you know that I don't know? I'm in command of 8 men in a combat zone. How are you going to tell me how to function that night?
When we come back, battling PTSD on the home front.
Maybe playing with a toy, and it'd be something that beeps or blinks or something, and the third time I told them, stop that. Gimme. Problem solved. Go away.
Of all those who serve in Afghanistan, the military estimates 6% will experience some kind of mental trauma. They call it OSI, Operational Stress Injury. And this summer, Canada's new Chief of the Defence Staff announced that fighting the stigma around mental injuries will be among his highest priorities.
That's why we're making this broad appeal to everyone who wears the uniform to step up, to be the difference, to support our comrades. We need to make every effort to support the mental well-being of our men and women. Let's do our part, wherever you are in this organization, to be the difference for those who we truly care for.
But to make a difference, General Walter Matinchik is under no illusions. It's a very proud culture that has to change.
We permeate the culture, that kind of warrior culture, where we want people to be warriors. We want them because they have to go into harm's way at sea, at 40,000 feet in the air, or in places like Afghanistan. We need that. We need them to be adventurous. We need them to be strong of heart. But at the same time, we need them to be accepting the fact that we're not all, in armor suits, and that when we do have a problem, that they go in for assistance.
How the message is delivered and by whom is important, which is why among the military's initiatives is expanding a program of peer counseling.
Is it a huge step? Maybe not, but it's definitely steps in the right direction. Yeah.
Where soldiers who have PTSD help others understand what they're up against. It was at such a support group in Windsor, Ontario, that we met Corporal Matt Salter.
What happened to me? I mean, came back with both arms, both legs. Everybody in my platoon made it back. Nothing happened to me. And so I didn't want to step forward and say, look, I think I have a problem.
Matt likes to say he had an easy war compared to many Afghan vets, but the reservist who volunteered for the mission had a tough job. Force protection, making sure those convoys stayed safe. Inside the vehicles, they'd scan the road looking for anything suspicious. When they found it, it was Matt's job to get out and investigate. Often, like this day when 2 Canadian soldiers died at the hands of a suicide bomber, it was Matt who cleaned up.
Not all of them were suicide bombers, but enough were. And enough were on my convoy that you get out there and you're looking, and you're looking, and you're looking, and you're looking. You're trying to figure out, what about that one? What about that one? What about that one? And you're trying to decide whether or not a vehicle or a pile of rubbish or a box at the side of the road is that threat. And the only way to do that is to get your mind spun up so fast that you're doing it even without thinking about it.
The problem was that when he got home, the spinning wouldn't stop.
I was working in a metal shop, and I could see him hammering plate steel. I know what noise plate steel is. I can identify it. I can pick it out. But every time that hammer came down, I'd flinch. Every time. Again and again and again and again and again.
For Matt's fiancée, Kimmy Grass, his nervousness made her nervous.
He was really jumpy. Simple things like grocery shopping. During the day, we couldn't do it. We'd have to wait and go to the 24-hour grocery because it would be too crowded in the store. And then I would feel bad for having to ask him to go grocery shopping because I knew if he went there, he could have a panic attack or anxiety or something.
The tiniest of details became the most important. And that leads to obsessive compulsive, where you can't help, but everything's got to be done right to the point where you don't want to step out the door. You know, I'd be sitting on the couch and go, I'm kind of thirsty. There's no pop in the fridge. You know, what's involved in going out to get a pop? And most people here don't think about it. They just grab some shoes, they're out the door. And I'm sitting here thinking, what do I need? And before I would go anywhere, I needed to have a plan. This is what I'm going to do. This is what I need. This is where I'm going. You know, this is how long it's going to take. And do I need to tell anybody? And all of a sudden events became so complicated that I'm having to think these things through from front to back that they become overwhelming. Now a simple task has become something which requires the 13 stages of battle drill and 8 hours of preparation. And all I wanted was a pop from the corner store.
At first, Kimmy dismissed it as just the pressures of being home. But soon Matt was in a rut, drinking, sleeping most of the day, and then wide awake and terrified at night.
He'd just wake up in cold sweat, like the bed would be drenched. And we call it the crypt keeper, because if you've ever seen it, this guy springs out of coffin, just sits right up, and that's what he's like. I've woken up to him trying to like get out of bed, and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, go back to sleep. And he would mumble something about, I can't, I have to get to him, he's hurt, or he's choking, or something. With Matt, that's when a lot of his flashbacks come, is when he's sleeping.
Eventually, it all caught up with him. Everything became just too much.
Wake up to go to work, and instead of just the general, I'm not going to work today, I'd cry for 10 or 15 minutes.
You'd cry?
Oh, every morning for weeks on end, I was crying every morning when I woke up. There are lots of people who don't love their jobs, who get up every morning, have their breakfast, and go to work because they realize they have to. Most of them don't have to curl up in a ball for cry to 10 minutes before they get out of bed.
Matt's employer had kept his job open while he was in Afghanistan, but increasingly Matt couldn't function. He quit that job and the one that followed. But that meant he was home all the time, which created new problems with his young boys.
My kids would ask me for something simple. Can I have a snack? No! Leave me alone! I drove them away.
I guess he put out enough that he didn't want to be bothered, so the kids knew that, and they stayed away from him. So he kind of faded into the background.
But in a small house, there's not much background when Dad is so quick to anger.
They'd be playing with a toy, and it'd be something that beeps or blinks or something, and the third time I told them, stop that. gimme. Problem solved, go away.
Me personally, I have right now a lot of anger issues, and you know, I go to a bar intending on finding someone. You know, it doesn't matter what they say or do. You know, if they gave my friend an ugly look, you know, I'd go up to him or something, or just wait for something to happen, you know. And I'd want it to happen. And then that was never me.
For Dave Hawkins, the feelings are still very raw. He's only been home 6 months, and his family too walks on eggshells.
No, he'd be right in your face. And he would threaten you.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
And did you feel threatened?
Mm-hmm. I thought he could hurt me. There were knives all over this house.
Knives?
Knives.
What kind of knives?
Hunting knives, any type of knife you could imagine. Short blades, long blades. He'd leave them out all over the place.
Dave knew things weren't right. Plans for enrolling in a firefighting course were put on hold. Instead, he threw himself into exercise and started self-medicating. Still does, with alcohol and drugs.
The worst part about it is going to bed, I find. That's the worst time. Because before you go to bed, well, first of all, you can't get to sleep. And you know the next day it's going to be exactly the same way. You're going to feel exactly the same thing. You're going to redo every single thing you did, all the emotions, and you know it's just going to suck.
What he would do is he would just go out and sleep in the cab of the truck. I phoned the base once, and I said to them, tell me something. Do other guys do it? Yes, they do. Some guys coming home would want to sleep in the bathroom at home. Couldn't sleep in their bed, too big of an area.
And did they tell you that you should worry about this?
No. They just said that it was something they had noticed that guys were doing. Sleeping in their trucks or sleeping in small confined areas. Oh, all right.
They didn't say maybe you want to bring him in and have him talk to somebody about it, or?
They didn't say, well, maybe you should go out and look for him, or maybe you should bring him in, or gosh, maybe we better come down there.
Yeah.
That was really weird.
For Dave, though, that was just fine. He didn't want anyone asking about his problems, because then he wouldn't have to admit he had any.
You feel ashamed, and you feel like there's so many other people that don't have this, you know, and you know, why you? They saw the same things as you, but you're the one who's acting like this, so you feel ashamed of yourself.
Nobody wants to be broken in the Army. Nobody. Nobody wants to be weak. I tried to do it on my own. I tried to be tough and soldiered through it.
Looking back, Matt can see how damaged he was. After he lost his civilian jobs, the forces found him a military one. And then they sent him on a leadership training course.
I went on what is considered to be one of the toughest courses in the CF for just regular soldiers.
For the first few days, Matt was fine, but there was something about being back in the field, even in simulation, that finally got to him. All of a sudden, the toughness that he'd always relied on just wasn't there.
And I cracked completely. I couldn't function. Everybody was really surprised because I hide it well. One of their higher ranked candidates up to that point, I said, look, just send me home. I'm not fit to do this job because I can't do it right. Went home, no job, nothing. It was done, completely broken.
The next morning, Matt got a military escort from the training camp to a doctor's office. A month later, he was diagnosed with PTSD. When we come back, the genocide, the general, and the hidden tragic toll.
Because ultimately, this injury, PTSD, leads to suicide in extreme. I tried it 4 times.
What Canada's military knows about PTSD comes in large part from this place and from this man. In 1994, Romeo Dallaire headed the UN assistance mission in Rwanda and watched as 800,000 people were butchered in less than 100 days. The world failed Rwanda and Dallaire, but as he returned home, the general blamed himself. He fought his own demons in private until the day he was found almost comatose on a park bench. More than anything or anyone, Dallaire has taught Canadians that combat injuries come in all forms, and that mental injuries can be the most devastating of all.
The ultimate abandonment, the ultimate anxiety, the ultimate all of a sudden sense of isolation, of unable to handle anymore this pain. Because ultimately, this injury, PTSD, leads to suicide in extreme. I tried it 4 times.
Two years after his heroic return from Afghanistan, Jeff Gravel went back for another tour. But this time, the demons were even harder to shake. He returned home and then transferred to a base in Ontario, a move that became a trigger for all the symptoms he'd been struggling to suppress. What was the turning point? Like, when did you decide, I can't handle this by myself anymore?
So I was up by myself in Petawawa, and I realized every night I was going through 8, 10, 12 beer. And it got to the point where I realized it wasn't me. Like, why am I doing what I'm doing? And I realized once I was away from my social support group, like my family, or whoever it may be, I realized there was a bigger problem.
For Jeff, salvation came in the form of an old sergeant major who recognized his problems and persuaded him to get help. And when you got the diagnosis, what was your reaction?
It's hard to deal with. I mean, you build yourself up to jump out of planes. You got to be a certain level of toughness to walk around the desert with a machine gun. You got to be certain. I mean, people hold you in a certain esteem or a certain regard, and to find out that you're weaker than all that take away the weapons and the armor, and you're just as frail as everybody else. It's a heavy realization.
You gotta help yourself too, man.
He got the usual treatment, medication, therapy, but he also discovered, like Matt Salter, that military peer counseling program. 3 years later, Jeff is still a regular member.
It lets you know that you're normal. You know, every other group of victims of sorts has a support group. And it's nice that soldiers now have that recognition that maybe parts of our job are heavier than what people thought.
Patient?
That even if the guy across the table is 65 from Vietnam or Suez, we've all got the same nightmares. The gatekeepers to our dreams are still the same. I mean, we still fight the same ghosts, regardless of the generation.
But the ghosts are not easily vanquished. Even with treatment and support, Jeff has had his setbacks.
If you're gonna do an 8-ball and smoke a half bag to try and come down from it and still ain't working, eventually you're gonna run out of resources, I guess. And then you realize the mess you've made yourself into, the lack of honor you've left in your friend's memory or your friend's honor. I mean, you've turned yourself into a total train wreck of an individual. So the only way out would seem to be that at the time. And then you get to that fear where you're like, oh, fuck, what am I doing? This is heavy. Like, this is point of no return. I put a rope around my neck.
Do you remember what it was as you stood there with that around your neck? What made you stop?
Fear. Fear in the final embarrassment that I was going to do total injustice to everybody. I was going to make an ass of myself, my family, and my friends had I gone out that way. That everybody deserved a better memory than that.
Matt, too, has had his dark moments. They all have.
You know, looking at my knives and going, yeah, that'd be quick and simple. It'll hurt for a second and then that'll be it. All my problems will go away.
Committing suicide is something that can happen within minutes. It's not something that you debate for hours. The intensity of the anxiety can grow on you in minutes. Even though there is a program in the forces, you know, of suicide prevention, but it is nowhere near the recognition of what suicide is.
General Dallaire is now Senator Dallaire, and he's made a campaign of fighting to have military suicides recognized and honored. In sending our soldiers to Afghanistan, he says, we have to know the lesson Americans learned after Vietnam. Decades later, it's estimated twice as many U.S. soldiers died as suicides as on the battlefield.
In 1997, 20 years after, reported they had over 102,000 suicides. So Vietnam wasn't 58,000. Vietnam was 160,000. And so it's not 131 casualties we've got now. What is it? 145? 150? 160?
Do we know?
No. And we feel, I feel, and it's an argument that I'm raising, and I'm getting more data, that both Veterans Affairs and National Defense are downplaying the impact of the operational trauma to being the primary source of the suicide. I have been putting in for access to information and stuff, and so far the answer I've been getting is they're not being tabulated.
Why does the military not go back and track those suicides?
Well, we should. We need to. We need to track, but it's so difficult because people will go off and whether they settle somewhere in Canada away for bases or they'll settle offshore, it is difficult to have a comprehensive data tracking program.
But you need to.
We need to, absolutely. Because we have a responsibility as an institution for those people who have served this country.
Right, turn. 1, 2, 3, 1.
Under Natinchik's leadership, the Defense Department is overhauling the way it tracks suicides to do a better job of following soldiers who leave the military or are discharged.
They might take 2 to 3 days to pull back, and then they'll be back to healthy functioning.
For those still serving, the emphasis is on prevention, trying to reduce the risk of PTSD by training future commanders to recognize the warning signs.
What type of coping skills might they be applying after the situation? Are they hitting a bottle?
Changing cultures is never easy or quick. This is a start.
I think it has come a long way. I have just over 12 years in. My first deployment in 2004 to Afghanistan, we had nothing like this when we returned.
The message is all about recovery.
I got very, very scared. I thought I was losing my mind. I thought I was going crazy.
The promotional material features soldiers who had PTSD, got treatment, and have been able to return to work.
Those who receive the support of unit co-workers and leaders have the greatest chance of returning to duty.
Mental health issues are not new, not unique to the Canadian Forces.
But the military's own numbers show that historically, most of those diagnosed with PTSD have not reintegrated, but have left the military or been discharged. On the one hand, you want people to come out and identify and get help, and yet on the other hand, the pattern seems pretty clear that those who do are ultimately discharged. Does this not suggest that maybe it's better to be quiet and suffer in silence?
The emphasis here is on recovery. The emphasis is not on discharge, and that's where we've changed the culture. Where a decade or so ago, when someone came out of Bosnia with an injury, they were out of the military very, very quickly. That's not the case. And where there is a medical injury that's especially attributed to an operational theater like Afghanistan, the authority to release that individual is kept very high to ensure that the entire chain of command and our medical folks give that individual as much care as we can.
For Jeff Gravel, though, that's not how it worked out. Did you want to be discharged? Did you want to stay? You wanted to stay?
Yeah, after all I had given, I would have expected a little bit more back, I guess. And maybe that was naive for me to think that my service was worth anything to them. But it's not.
Do you think if your injury had not been PTSD, or that had not been among your injuries, that it might have been different?
Perhaps. I think PTSD comes off as a bit of a stigma, and a lot of people are scared of it still. It's a scary term, and it implies a lot. I mean, with that comes certain substance abuse issues, all kinds of issues that can spiral from it or have spiraled from it, and as soon as someone hears that from a chain of command, it's scary, because they don't know what they're dealing with as a soldier or a liability. So I think, I'm sure it played a factor.
Because D&D says with great pride that they are trying to overcome the stigma, and they're putting programs in place, and generals are making announcements, and but what's the reality, or what was your reality?
My reality was the exact opposite.
Having served with distinction in Afghanistan, Jeff was discharged from the military last year with a neck injury from a parachute accident and a diagnosis of severe PTSD. He's got a pension, but he says the military's promise of helping him find a job never materialized. Matt Salter, the reservist who volunteered to fight, is also struggling.
I can't do my job. I can't be a father. I can't be a boyfriend or a husband. I can't even be a hero anymore.
Today, he's in therapy and on medication, but the diagnosis of PTSD is going to come at a high price. The job the military gave him when he lost his civilian one will soon end. And you're about to be pensioned by the army that you so loved.
Yeah, we talk about a regimental family, and we mean it. These are your brothers, your sisters, your fathers, your uncles, your aunt. They are family. And I'm being told that because I cannot do my job anymore, I can't be part of the family. I'm going to be, I can come in and visit, but I can't be anymore.
How do you feel about that?
I can't think past it. This is who I am.
Sometimes I get upset and angry, thinking and hearing about these people that have gone 3-4 times. And they're fine.
Since he got home, he's doing better.
It's not easy watching someone you love walk away from their passion. But then Kimmy considers the alternative.
It's not fair for me to think so-and-so went over 3 times, he's fine. Matt went once, and he's not. Because, like I said, Matt came back, and a lot of people don't.
It's the same attitude Dave Hawkins' family has taken. They knew even before he came home that something was wrong. Even still, it's taken 6 months for Dave to get a PTSD diagnosis, and it's only in the last few weeks he started therapy. Do you feel like you're in control of your life, or no?
Right now, I don't. I feel like I'm just kind of on the sidelines watching it.
Can you imagine a future for yourself at this point?
Not really. Not right now. It's hard to explain. You kind of... I don't know. It's really hard to explain. You're just watching everything go by. And you're not actually living it.
By the time Canada's combat mission in Afghanistan is over in 2011, it's expected 35,000 Canadian men and women will have served. Using the military's own estimate, more than 2,000 will come home injured mentally. What Canadians must remember is that while the fighting will one day stop, the battle against PTSD will never really be over. And according to Romeo Dallaire, never really won.
The group that reinforced me in Rwanda, out of the 12, 8, 9 have had varying levels of PTSD, and one of them, it only happened about 3 years ago. That's 12 years after.
Wow.
One of them committed suicide last year. That's 14 years after. Suicide.
Do you still feel vulnerable in that way?
I still am under therapy. You just never know.
Now, if you want to know more about this story or any of our programs, you can go to our website. It's at cbc.ca/fifth. Please stay with us. When we return, a look at the story we'll have